What do you think of that?
I think it's all right.
Does this sound groovy?
It's groovy, baby.
Is it lulling you into a false sense of security before... Dun, dun, dun.
I don't know about all that.
Halloween spooktacular.
Yeah, I don't think I have that false sense of security thing of which you speak.
You don't think that it's possible to be secure with me at any point? Is that what that's about?
I think that whole sense of security is just gone altogether.
Like I've ruined your ability to ever feel secure?
I'm just always like, wait, no, something's coming. Okay.
When are the demons going to pop out of the walls?
Well, I don't know about all that.
Well, that is something you should be concerned about because I see shit popping out of the walls all the time.
I know you do. I know. It's okay.
So,
I see different stuff, so.
She sees angels, I bet. She's good people.
I don't know about all that.
Not evil people like me. Welcome, everyone, to episode number 72 of Sounds Like Liberty podcast here on the Launchpad Media, where we are always launching ideas in your direction. I am, as always, your host, Nikki P, here with my lovely wife and co-host, Lizzie. How
Hi
are
there.
You don't wait for me to ask you how you're doing. You just say hi there.
I did. Because you said my name.
The demons are coming for us.
I was like, hi there.
So we have a wonderful, wonderful spooky episode. We recorded this over a month ago, and I've been waiting
for the spooky.
So
time
patiently
for the spooky.
Oh, it's so spooky.
Spooky.
Nice. Some classics for. This particular episode we did with the illustrious Mr. De La Paz.
He was delightful.
Which I know from the Friends Against Government podcast. And you're right, he is delightful. He is, well read.
Mm-hmm.
I would say well respected, but I don't know that anyone really respects the Dogman Respector.
He's certainly personable, and he knows how to say the things without, taking away your ability
saying it without saying it.
To make your own judgments, to do your own research, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, we got into the nitty gritty of Walt Disney, the Illuminati.
Yeah, I got weird.
Jim Morrison.
I had to go
Chris
sit in a
Cornell.
corner and rethink some things.
So it was no different than any other day of your life, Liz. She's always sitting in a corner rethinking things.
Yeah, that's true.
Most importantly, getting married to me.
No.
She's consistently rethinking that one.
Never
Did I have to?
You're just silly.
Anyways, folks, before we get into it, let's remind them to go check out the soundslike.liberty.com. I've been doing a lot of work on the page.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of fun links. It looks nicer. Perhaps interacts a little bit better. Yeah,
you can find out all sorts of stuff about us that you might not have known.
Yeah, and more importantly, I added the Goodreads section, so you can go and check us out on Goodreads.
Yeah, which is...
We've both been reading this year.
We are very much book people, so...
Yes.
It's a thing.
And if you want to do something other than like that, and maybe, I don't know, say throw us a couple shekels for Christmas or whatever.
That'd be cool, too.
You can go and sign up for the Freedom Choir.
Yeah.
Where we have some podcasts that we hide behind a wall. The Married to Liberty podcast.
It's basically me talking about stuff, and Nick asks me awkward questions.
The important thing is that it's Lizzie talking.
He just lets me go while I attempt to answer them in somewhat of a coherent fashion.
It's adorable. It is.
So there you go.
It's everything that everybody who listens to the show wants, which is less of me, more of you.
I suppose.
There's also the archive of our
year-round tree.
Yes, that's where we talk about Christmas movies.
Because we like books and we like Christmas, and this is our Christmas thing, and it's so much fun.
Liz is over here doing her happy Christmas dance.
I am.
So, I'm pretty excited about it. I just got to get all this stupid Disney trip and stupid Thanksgiving out of the way.
Get that rolling, and then we are going to have all sorts of Christmas fun with our new season of the year-round tree, and there might be a little Christmas special in your future.
No, drop that might bullshit out of your vocabulary. I said I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
Okay.
I don't care if none of the other guests show up for our Andy Williams style Christmas special. I'll do it myself. No,
I was not doubting you. I was being coy.
No, I think you're doubting me. For all you people who love Halloween, Big ups on you.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. We're okay with it.
Okay with it.
Mhm.
We're Christmas people, though.
Yeah.
So let's listen to a song, I guess, and get into this interview with Professor Dexter De La Paz.
Yeah.
I think I forgot a couple of the names, but
I'm pretty sure he says it in there somewhere.
yeah, we'll have fun. Check it out. Welcome, Prof. Can I call you Prof? What do you like to go by?
You can call me literally anything you want to, except late for dinner, you know?
Oh,
Right
well,
on.
if we were to invite you to dinner, what are we making? What should we have available?
Well, you know, I'll eat just about anything too.
Oh man,
But
this guy's
as
really
far as-
accommodating.
He's really coming
Yeah, as far as what to call me, you can go ahead and use my given name, Dexter, if that's easier for you. Most of the internet seems to know me as Paz, because that's what I use as a screen name, but
Okay.
it's really up to you two.
So how does that come about? How do you become Paz?
Well,
And how do you get
I-
in the name before the Paz? And did you think about Pez first?
I did not think about Pez.
Okay.
The way it came about is really the story of my journey into libertarianism, right?
Ooh. Okay.
Like most idiot high schoolers, I was just a team player, you know. Specifically, I ended up being red team. But
Okay.
as I got into college, I joined a fraternity,
A
and
good
several
one or a
members
bad
of
one?
that fraternity. What was that?
A good one or a bad one?
Definitely a good one. Definitely a good one. I mean, there's wild stories there, but you know, they were all good people, and nothing
We
ever
haven't,
harmed anybody.
we haven't told many of my rat stories online, have we?
No,
Okay. Liz is looking at me. I'd like to keep it that way.
I just figured it was intentional.
No, I just never think about it. I have a few of them. Look, I was in charge of new member education. You better believe I got a story or two. With
Yeah,
air
I
quotes
think
rubber works
everyone's got
education.
some stories.
Mhm.
I was actually president of our chapter for a minute.
Yeah, I spent 2 semesters as my frat president as well. It was local, so there was only one chapter.
nice. Yeah, ours was national.
Anyhow.
I don't think I ever talked to him. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
so you sent me a list today, and I
Yes.
was super excited about the list of things to talk about. I don't think it's possible that we could make it through all of them. So I will just lay that out there, folks. We're gonna go and get what we can get in the constraints of the episode. I expect to have Pause back to finish up what we're not going to get to. And, you know, I'll be honest, some of the things that pop up fairly often, I imagine that you'd go on fraternity if we needed to. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your kind of claim to fame is these days?
Well, my claim to fame, I suppose, the reason why people in this corner of the internet know me at all, is I've kind of carved out a niche for myself as sort of the conspiracy guy on a lot of these sort of libertarian podcasts that aren't necessarily,
Libertarian
I'm going to
podcasts.
use the word super serious, but which is to say that they're not necessarily all about hard policy and stuff, right? Like I got my start with the Damn Woods. Those guys were nice enough to have me on. And then I ended up getting close with Bird and Carr, who we all know from the Friends Against Government. And from there, it's just been a natural exploration of my somewhat silly and extremely serious interests in conspiracy theory, cryptids, and I've just kind of become a go-to source for people on those topics because that's what I waste my free time on.
It's not a waste. Not a waste at all. That's one. That's why I was drawn to these, because I have forever been a big fan of cryptids, and like just in general, classic lore always has fascinated me.
Sure.
I actually have a copy. I can't remember which edition it is. Do you remember what edition it was, Liz?
I don't.
Of my Grimm's fairy tales that I got.
Yeah, it's one of the
there's
original story.
There's a very, I don't know if you've ever followed like Grimm's fairy tales and like the history behind it and like how many editions and as things changed before with all the editions. But a couple years ago, I think it was Princeton Press, wasn't it?
Perhaps.
Princeton Press actually put out a version of the Grimm Brothers fairy tales. And it's supposed to be the most complete version before they started doctoring what the stories actually were. Because at a certain point, a culture had kind of moved on, and a lot of the ways in which the original stories were written didn't make sense anymore. Like, that's why if you get into the history of it, we think of all of them being evil step-parents in the books, and that's just because the culture and like Christianity had taken over the culture, couldn't deal with the idea of the actual parents eating their children, which is actually how most of those stories were told originally.
Sure.
And so
and not to get on too big of a tangent here, but Grimm's, especially when you start getting into that sort of old fairy lore kind of stories, you run into a lot of really insane synchronicities with a lot of other stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
But, just to state what I'm getting at here, I know what you're saying, and that evolution of language really distorts our understanding of those stories, which is dangerous for people with an interest in the weird part of it, like me, because then we're losing a valuable resource to contextualize it.
Well, I mean, and it's something it tells you about history in general, and moreover, especially since all that is actually like it's a first generation writing down of something that existed only as spoken word prior to that. And that in and of itself is a very, very specific change that I don't think people. And then here in America, obviously, our connection to a lot of that is through Disney, and for reasons which may be obvious or maybe not obvious to some, those stories were changed in perhaps other less subtle ways to make them make sense in our own culture. Now, was that on purpose? Was that just something that people did because they thought it would sell? There's evidence out there.
That becomes the question, doesn't it?
Right.
It becomes a big question. So why don't you start there? We were both skimming through that one, and Liz looked horrified the entire time she was looking at it, the article we're talking about. What's the deal with Disney? I mean, all I know about him is that he hated Jews, because Family Guy told me that.
Right. Well,
it was a Robot Chicken. Robot Chicken said he hated Jews.
As repulsive as we find that idea today, and as legitimately repulsive as it really truly is, a lot of those people absolutely did. It was culturally ingrained in almost everyone until just 3-4 generations ago, I'm
going to be honest, I'm not somebody I have to preach to. I got in trouble in 8th grade, and my teacher tried to purposely fail me because she tried to turn our 8th grade English class into a Jewish history class. So all we did was read books about Jews and by Jews and for Jews to like beat into us.
Yeah.
So I wrote a paper actually entitled Adolf Hitler, A New View of a Monster, specifically focusing specifically focusing on the fact that he wasn't exactly an abnormality for his hatred of the Jews. That's not what made him different in that era.
Right.
He was perhaps better at hating the Jews than many other people were, but that's not exactly a defining characteristic to differentiate.
Absolutely.
And it's unfortunate.
So, that is one of the things to keep in mind with Disney and their whole bit. But that is far from the only point. Now, there is a certain class of modern conspiracy theorist that likes to fixate on MK Ultra, Operation Monarch, and other historical United States government attempts at perfecting mind control. Now, where Disney comes into this is often as someone they can point the finger at because of the insane, constant, unending meltdown of the child stars that come out of the Disney pipeline.
Ah.
And I think anyone who's listening to this can think of the immediate examples. You know, you see people like Amanda Bynes, Britney Spears, Miley Cyrus, these people who just seem to go completely off the deep end as soon as their connection with Disney is severed, right?
Yeah.
It is weird how much that parallels the whole black comedian thing. Just saying.
Yeah.
You know,
So
whatever happened to Martin Lawrence? Look what happened to Eddie Murphy, Dave Chappelle. All megastars in their time. And for some strange reason, at a certain point in their career, they all go crazy. Somehow, Dave Chappelle bought his way back. And it looks like Murphy may be doing that. What's the difference?
So what this certain class of conspiracy theorists, these people who specialize on the mind control stuff, the reason they fixate on that and the reason they point the finger like they do and in the way that they do is because of the historical connections between military intelligence, the CIA, and Disney proper. Now, in that article that I linked you guys, there's a section very specifically talking about how several of the early players in the CIA enabled Disney to get the actual land to build Disneyland on.
It's a huge amount
and
of
went
land.
into what was that?
Which was just a huge amount of land.
A huge amount of worthless land at that point in time. Lots of swamp there, right?
Yeah, I don't know much about the actual land itself. I wish I did, but
It's,
I don't know if it was built on the
Florida.
swamp.
Florida's all swamp, the entire fucking state. It's a shithole, but that being said.
Yes. As it goes on, that article, it gets into the connections between Disney and both the FBI and the CIA, right? So we're talking about these close working relationships. They're enabling Walt Disney to get all these resources he needs to set up his media empire. But what we now in our modern era know about the CIA is that while they were enabling all this stuff, it came with a load of strings attached. And that's where you see something called Operation Mockingbird, where the CIA was literally hiring journalists and placing them in key positions throughout media companies all over the U.S. in direct violation of U.S. law about internal propaganda distribution. Which, you know, it seems pretty obvious today, but this was mind-blowing when the stuff was all coming out.
People still don't know about or don't pay attention to or ignore or try and pretend didn't happen to this day.
Right, and they're so programmed by it, they just accept it as a given instead of realizing just how insane that is. But to continue on, the connection here is not just was the CIA placing all these people in media as their own agents or at least informants, they were also trying to master mind control using acid and other chemical compounds. Now, officially, that program was discontinued, and the contention of conspiracy theorists that operate in this space, at least, talking about pop stars and musicians and actors, is that obviously this stuff never ended, and that's why we're seeing these people have meltdowns today. Because as soon as they lose the Disney sphere, or leave the Disney sphere, that means they're away from their handlers and become instantly unstable. So that's the contention, at least. That's the explanation, the connection between all these breakdowns.
Now, are we saying that they're all hopped up on government drugs, or are we just saying that they're, without the constant peeping in their ears, that they kind of lose what's going on and lose their grasp of reality?
Yeah, so the contention of the people who study this theory and the people who advance these ideas, their contention is that these people start to go nuts because they are out of the control system. You know, they're trying to work through whatever trauma was being used to try and shape their psyche.
Yeah.
And that's another important part of this. Because, again, according to these people, the idea is that it's a combination of both drugs and abuse to get specific reactions out of them. And that kind of harkens back to, what everyone memes on is the satanic panic. Like these people are being horribly abused in an attempt to deliberately break their personality or induce certain psychological conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether or not there's any truth to that, that's up to the listeners to research and decide. I think that the truth is always stranger than fiction, so they at least owe it to themselves not to rule it out entirely. Especially, again, when you look at the way these people all just completely melt down, seemingly out of nowhere.
Well, here's a question for you, Liz, since you're here. What did Julie Andrews do after she was kind of out of the Disney sphere?
Honestly, I don't know a ton about her, kind of the middle point of her career. Did she
have a middle point of her career?
I feel like she did like Broadway and sort of off the.
I remember that when she was old, her boobs were shown in a movie. That's the only thing outside of Disney movies I know about Julie Andrews.
That's kind of weird. Okay. No, I know
Fun
she did
fact
Broadway
for the
and stuff.
listeners.
I'm just asking the question. Maybe other people know more about Julie Andrews than me. But I do find it odd that, there's a certain type of convergence I can see from that long ago to what we see now. What's odd to me, say for an instance, I think people don't realize how deep the Disney thread actually goes. Say the whole Hollywood Records bit. Do you know anything about Hollywood Records?
I can't say that I do, but I might know the connections if you can tell me a little bit more.
Specifically, Hollywood Records represented a very particular band, one that you would never in a million years ever think would be connected with Disney. That band is the Insane Clown Posse.
Really?
Yes. Who happens to have an entire fucking movement. Like literally an entire group of people called Juggalos that, for whatever reason, have had at some point in their life direction directly from Disney. Now, it's not something also you hear much about either. So,
well, see, and now that gets to another really interesting angle of all this, right? It's not just necessarily the people under the primary or first order influence of these experiments. They're not alleged. We know they happened. We just don't know if they stopped or if they're ongoing. It's not just the people who were the immediate targets of it, but who those people were then released on. And it's not a stretch to say that if you train someone to be a pop star and manipulate them into a certain thing, and if you then place songwriters in their life or set them up to have a specific audience, that you can just push your message out through them to whatever purpose.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that that I think people fail to think about is, the MK Ultra, the reason we know about it is because they couldn't keep it secret anymore. But as with most things that government does, there's a term called, limited hangout.
Yes.
In which they'll highlight in a very specific part of something and let it leak.
Mm-hmm.
Which in this particular case, might say was the whole drugs thing. You give them this big juicy bit that they can chew on for a long time, and then they don't pay attention to the other stuff that's going on. Nobody asks any more questions. They just assume that this is too big. This could be the only thing. But we know, especially with the CIA, that while mind control is like a pipe dream, perhaps, and they spend a lot of time working on drugs to try to figure a way out of that. That isn't really how they operate generally. What they do is actually far more, insidious, because they work.
Absolutely.
They work through, mind control isn't isn't exactly possible. We absolutely have the ability to direct through suggestion. We'll just say.
Well, you can do that through
absolutely,
incentive.
and that's a great way to put it.
And I mean, you look at Disney movies, look at the ways they exist, look at the stories that they tell, and how those stories are directed. And we're focusing a lot on Disney here. Not to mention the fact that the tentacles, like I said, they have record labels that nobody even knows are Disney operated subsidiaries. In general, though, we'd be remiss to think that only this one giant corporation that's theoretically privately owned is involved like this. It kind of ties into something that I stumbled across today. And it's not something that I just stumbled across. I just happened to see today. It was something I've always been aware of and feel like a lot of people don't spend as much time talking about as they could. It's the connection to, the Chester Bennington and Chris Cornell situation.
Well, and I want to put just one more name in there before we get on to this topic. Because if you folks remember what happened to Avicii, too.
Young kid, died really, really inexplicably at the peak of his career.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there's a direct connection, but all three of those happened within, it was 13, 14 months of each other?
Yep, all very, very similar deaths. All, you have to ask the question, why would these people do these things now?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to at other points in their career.
Yeah. And if we want to get into the real juicy bit here, the elephant in the room, I think, at least for us, and, bringing the elephant into the room for the listeners, it's a little bit apocryphal, a little bit alleged, but all three of them were supposedly working on anti-child abuse projects at the time of their suicides.
Interesting. It's very, very interesting. Who else do we know that was super famous, may have been a child star, and, kind of threatened to come clean? Anybody named Corey Haimless?
I was just about to say
thing.
It's Corey someone. For the life of me, I couldn't come up with his surname.
Is this why Corey Feldman has never actually had a worthwhile music career?
I don't want to say for a fact it is, but I like to use innuendo.
Yeah.
It's something people need to think about. Again, the truth is just infinitely stranger than fiction.
So,
and especially when just to make a point real quick here, you need to contextualize that with the allegations of pedophilia against Walt Disney himself back in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like Michael Jackson's the only person who built a giant theme park directed at kids that made it world famous.
Right.
I mean, in general, Disney is such a weird place because you think about how gigantic some of the ramifications of things that it's done are. You can look at what in the modern world, the way in which they've kind of destroyed all of the great franchises of our youth. Marvel, they've successfully gone and ruined that. They've ruined Star Wars. No one will ever care about that again. And they're just kind of going through the gamut of every beloved property that's existed. And in a similar thing, they're also the reason that copyright law makes no sense anymore. The fact that the last time Disney lobbied Washington, it was updated to I can't even remember. I would say it's
150 years or 120 years or something.
Yeah,
it's pretty bonkers.
No one should be able to own copyright on anything that long. It's well past your kids. It's well past your kids. And the big thing is they haven't wanted to lose the rights to the mouse ears because that's the original Steamboat Willie is under copyright, and so you can't utilize that. If God forbid that ever entered public domain, what has Disney got? it rips down the whole thing.
Well, and to get into political theory for a moment, that's just when you have to start considering or understanding that a sufficiently large corporation has so much interest in the status quo that they're functionally indistinguishable from the state, right?
Yeah, literally, our copyright law as it exists is 100% because Disney wanted it to exist this way. That's it. That one major company has sunk so much money into making sure that that's the case. Most people, their minds would just reel at how much has actually been spent on that. That's super weird.
Yeah.
So I guess here's the big question. Apparently, like we've got this thread that's exists back in the 1940s. Like it's a thing that's been forever almost at this point. My question is, what should we be seeing? What is it trying to keep us from seeing? What is this big picture about all this? Do we have a sense of that?
Yeah, see, now that's the most loaded question you could possibly ask me, right?
That was absolutely the most loaded question anyone could be asked.
What is lurking in the background? What aren't we seeing? And I wish
beings?
More than anything I could tell you, because that's kind of my whole shtick. I want nothing more than to see behind that veil myself. I'm a truth seeker. Fundamentally, is my shtick. I want to know what's behind it all. But to ask me what I think is, well, I don't know.
See,
I like to think.
Here's the thing.
Go ahead.
I spent so much time thinking about the fact that what was Alex Jones like? What was the thing that he was always adamant about? That I feel like he comes closer and closer to 100% vindication on, and is still deplatformed. Like they had to make up the Sandy Hook thing to make it stick. I think is what really happened. But his whole thing was that our government had been infiltrated by interdimensional beings that are what is the word we're looking for here? That are utilizing child sex cults to direct our government.
Sure. Well, and now here we go. Let's get into the spicy stuff.
At least two parts of that have been proven true at this point.
Well, and I've been known to remark around the internet that a conspiracy theorist is just someone who's right about everything 10 years too early.
Right.
Right? So you're absolutely right. And he's been harping on that forever. If you remember, way back in the early aughts, Alex Jones really cut his teeth on the Bohemian Grove. And what's interesting about that...
It's a lot of gay shit going on.
Not just that, but they also have a ceremony in which they supposedly it's all an act, a sham.
Yeah.
But in which they actually practice child sacrifice. And one of his big early allegations is that they were actually killing children.
The question I think is probably, so would you say, do you think, I think it was Nixon that said that, like what goes on at Bohemian Grove, and he was, I don't know, it was a bunch of queer shit, I thought.
Yeah, that's a Nixon paraphrase.
Yeah, who had actually been there and been like a part of it, and that's his takeaway, is the guy was all pretty queer. So you think that's kind of like a limited hangout kind of thing? Oh, we'll give him just enough to see this bit, and we can kind of, whatever. Because I mean, that's the thing. We find out more and more of this stuff that Jones would talk about is actually true. And don't get me wrong, I think he dealt in hyperbole a lot more than was useful for even his own cause.
Sure, while calling them literal vampires instead of figurative vampires is a sort of jump the shark moment.
Yeah.
Right? Where he loses some credibility.
But is it maybe just we're 10 years away from finding out that there are actual vampires and we're just not hip yet?
Yeah, well, look. So I've incorporated
10 years ago,
as
that
a
had told you
brand...
pedophiles couldn't have taken over our government, but at this point, it seems like they have.
Well, 10 years ago, I would have told you you're wrong, and pedophiles were still running the government because they were. But You know, okay, back on topic here. Yeah,
there's too many places to go with this. I know it's
I almost went on a tangent there, but to stay on what we're saying, yeah, I think that there's no reason to believe that it's not just a limited hangout and that there's another shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Because if you want to look at the sources and look at some of the stories that are out there, but we're not hearing, there's already plenty of evidence that this stuff, specifically the child abductions and whatnot, was going on as early as like the mid 70s. You know, and that's just the stuff that people weren't ready to swallow yet. It's only getting memed into mainstream knowledge because Alex Jones was able to put an entertainment twist on it to deliver that knowledge in the first place.
Him and his gay machine elves.
Yeah, the machine elves.
Been doing too much DMT, Alex Jones.
Not hip with that. I did see that Bohemian Grove video back in the day. Though it was something,
right? Where he's running around in the woods with the camera.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you know, and you could see stuff, but there's just enough, you know, obscurity that you can't really tell. You know, and I think that is kind of part of maybe what works to kind of keep it going. Like if everything was clear, if everything was out, then people would ask fewer questions about it.
Well, but
they'd be asking the questions they shouldn't be asking, right?
Here's always the thing that I will throw back at this is that do you also feel like in a case of Alex Jones, do you think like it's not, and this is also, I think this is also part of the equation as to why they get to talk about this in the way that they do. The fact of the matter is nobody wants to believe these types of people are real. And you feel like maybe that's why things like the whole vampires from interdimensional beings and all that stuff gets kind of tossed into the mix. Because even at that core, even when you have this knowledge and you've seen it for what it is, like the fact of the matter is nobody wants to buy into the fact that, you know, human beings could be this awful. So, you know, it's like the layer that you have to add for it to make sense to you, as opposed to dealing with the fact that no, human beings are just fucked up. We're just nuts. And I would rather believe that werewolves exist than just people are that awful. Because the one makes more sense.
Before we move on too much here, I want to even push back on that a little bit.
Okay.
You know, there's so much, or I'll phrase it like this. The range of human perception is so limited that we don't really understand what's going on around us at all times anyways. So to rule out the possibility that other beings or other things could conceivably be here is narrow-minded. Now, I'm not saying affirmatively that they are, but until you rule out that sort of thing definitively, you know, it would just be foolish to say that human nature is just that rotten. Well, you know, mimetic egregore brain parasites could be real in a literal sense and not just a figurative.
I feel like if we've learned anything from, you know, NASA looking at, you know, the space-time continuum and all the things that they've sort of discovered recently there, it's that, yeah, there is a distinct possibility of things that we just could not have imagined existing that have always been there, and we just didn't have the technology to see them.
Well, and I mean, and you'd be surprised at the things that you can kind of ignore in real time because your brain doesn't want to process them. Me and my buddy Tyshawn, I think I've talked about before, we were writing a book about goblins, we called them, and it was a post-apocalyptic book set in a world where essentially resources had become scarce to the point that we had to psychologically come to grips with the fact that human beings weren't alone on the planet, and that there were these other very real, very physical beings called goblins that we just kind of lived side by side with and never noticed. But when the resources became so scarce that we had to deal with it, we then had to kind of deal with the fact that they're real things. Your brain's used to editing out stuff that it doesn't know how or doesn't have a way to process.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is a very fascinating thing to me.
It is, and that just goes back to the point that I was making about the limited scope of human perception, preventing us from knowing just what's out there.
I mean, do you think that that's why specifically they focused on psychedelic drugs with projects like MK Ultra, and they thought that might be the gateway into perhaps short-circuiting and shortcutting what they were already successfully doing with just, propaganda techniques?
Absolutely. In one word, absolutely. I think that they were trying to open up enough of the perceptive range that they could make their targets more vulnerable to the stimuli that they already knew how to prod at a person with.
Yeah.
And if in the process they stumbled onto who knows what else when they opened those doors of the mind.
Hey, how's it going? Nikki P here. Want to support the show or just give a big middle finger to Patreon? Consider stopping over to supportSLL.com. Members of the Freedom Choir get access to the private Facebook group and actual physical merch. Want access to the unedited raw interviews as they're recorded way before they're released? It's in there. Is that not enough? And you want membership to Freedom Song 365? It's in there. There's even monthly bonus swag for top tier supporters. So head on over to supportsll.com. Help Liz and I get to libertarian functions and even just cover the costs of making the show. If I'm not a good enough salesman, how about this?
Support my mom and dad and Sounds Like Liberty. Go to supportsll.com.
You heard her, folks. Join the Freedom Choir at supportsll.com. It's so odd that you say doors of the mind there. Is that like a direct leave?
That is very perceptive of you. And I would like to say yes.
All right. So he didn't quite quote Aldous Huxley. But that I know that he's one word off, which would be when the doors of perception are finally clear, which was the inspiration for a very famous musician who also is a notorious drug user.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps less infamously, the child of a very famous military personnel.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Paz?
Yeah, so I would also like to just add, he is one of my absolute favorites. I have a huge affinity for Mr. Jim Morrison, if people don't know who we're talking about.
The Lizard King.
The Lizard King himself, yes.
Is it odd that he's known as the Lizard King, given what you know about him?
I've never found any reason to think that nickname comes into play with anything else. I like to think of it as a happy coincidence, but that could just be things that I don't know enough about him biographically.
It could also
I don't know what the origin
just
is.
very simply be that it's something you don't want to see for yourself. Given that you do have a bias in this regard. But I digress. We're getting too much off topic on it. So what's so odd, I guess, about the Doors?
Well, what's so odd specifically about Mr. Morrison is that his father is most famous for commanding part of the naval contingent at the Gulf of Tonkin. But before even that, he also worked in naval intelligence. So you have a direct line from military intelligence into the
king of the
songwriter. One of them, yes. And it's symptomatic or a sign of further connections when you begin looking at the sheer number of famous musicians who are what are colloquially called military brats, right? Or army brats.
Oh, yeah.
And the hooks between military intelligence and music, especially on the American scene in the mid-20th century, is undeniable. There's no counter argument to it. It's omnipresent.
How many of those famous bands from, the psychedelic era, how many skips and jumps are they from Project MK Ultra in the drug department?
Yeah, well, so
what was Ken Kesey up to over there?
Yeah.
beating his ass.
Everything was so interconnected that no one was more than one step removed from everybody else in that sort of scene. And this actually brings up one of my favorite parts of it. If you want to get really wild here, Charles Manson.
You mean that guy who wanted to be in the Beach Boys?
That guy who wrote songs for the Beach Boys, yeah.
As far as I know, only one of them ever became like famous. I can't remember which one it is offhand.
It is, well, I'll just Google it real quick.
Good old Beach Boys.
Mm-hmm. And they seem like the most,
I don't want to
clean-cut American band.
I just happened to look at my phone for the record, and it's a tweet saying, I can't believe the lizard people bought out the Fadcast. So I happened to mention King of the Lizards not moments before this tweet. And they tell me that my devices aren't all listening to me. Mm-hmm. Every one of these screens isn't paying attention.
The word for that, I believe, is a synchronicity.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, let's see. The sole writing credit Manson has on one of their albums is on Cease to Exist. But that's not the one we're talking about.
No, it's not the one we're talking about. What is the other one?
Was it Never Learn Not to Love?
I think that
sounds right, yeah.
I think that might be it, actually.
I think that's the one. But if I can get even a little bit deeper here and a little bit weirder into the woo, on the B side of that was a single called Bluebirds Over the Mountain.
Oh, it sounds beautiful.
And now, the reason that is not beautiful, and you should consider it horrifying, is the origins of the CIA's fascination with mind control goes back to members of the CIA and their obsession with a play called, it was Blue Birds in the Valley or something. I don't know. I'll have to look up the specific name and send it to you. But the theme of bluebirds here is what's important. Bluebirds are mimetically attached to mind control projects as well, is my point.
Interesting.
I keep coming to this bird thing. So are they, do we think that the Fadcast is like is a part of this whole thing, trying to infiltrate the libertarian, like the people that are trying to think outside the box? I keep coming back to the bird thing. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
It does. I think I'd be more concerned about the mascot of Twitter being a bluebird than Mr. Bird Artist, but
see, this is why you have guys like this on, the guys that actually pay attention and read shit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm over here worried about the environment, and he's all worried about like the real deal history.
I think it's all intertwined, though.
Good
Lord. It 100% is.
So you think that
there is a Sherlock Holmes story, right? The Study in Scarlet. And a scarlet thread running through everything, or a scarlet thread of murder running through everything. And that just gets to the point that everything is absolutely 100% connected. You just need to find that connection.
Yep. Because, let's not pretend that, even if we're talking about crazy Alex Jones theories that came up, there is stuff in the water. I think we could.
No, everybody knows that.
Definitively.
Yeah, no.
Whether or not it's doing whatever to whomever.
Well, no. There is stuff in the water that is in fact changing the sex of a particular species of frog.
And the EPA doesn't have a problem with that.
That's not even like a reach. Like, that's documented. Not only does Alex Jones have documents, the rest of the world has those documents now.
Yeah. So the EPA apparently doesn't have a problem with that.
EPA doesn't have a problem with a lot of things. That's why it shouldn't exist.
Yeah. Well,
EPA. Amen to that.
Oh no, I host an environmentalism podcast, and one of my biggest soapboxes in the world is how destructive the EPA is to the environment. Just hilariously enough, I've been reading a bunch of articles preparing for the next episode, and just seeing all the things in which people are getting pissed that the EPA is not doing on behalf of them. And like, well, if the EPA didn't exist, you could just sue the shit out of that company, but they do.
Right.
So sit and watch as nothing happens. Whatever, Liz's head looks like it's about to explode right now.
Well, no, because thinking about
so
that,
much. The scarlet thread looks like she wants to hang herself with it.
No,
it's
making me think about these walkouts that have happened with the school kids, and just thinking about like how many layers of messaging have they received at this point that was enough of a catalyst for them to be like, yeah, we're just gonna all walk out of school because the world's gonna end, or why are they doing it?
They think the world's gonna end.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, see, now if I can wrap this all back together,
make it nice and tidy for us.
Tie that up with the scarlet thread we're talking about. We all know that government agencies, being what they are capable of a lot more forward planning than any one given individual. And I use given individual very specifically. But there's obviously a plan in place here. They federalized education for a reason, because then you're controlling the incoming information of children. What was that?
I didn't say anything about Agenda 21 from the UN.
Yeah. Well, behold the pale horse, right?
Yeah. Well, there you go.
I didn't point out how children are absolutely being indoctrinated. I haven't pointed out how many places are trying to get children the legal right to vote. Children that don't understand economics because we took it out of schools. Children that just happen to believe whatever fairy tale about the environment you choose to sell them.
But it's not just the schools, though, and that's where this gets so important.
Oh, no, I'm with you on this.
The government has not yet successfully destroyed the family, despite any given number of attempts to totally detonate the family structure. And you hear it in the language they use and everything.
It takes a village.
Because they haven't, they need to use their corporate lackeys to influence them when their direct influence is out of bounds in the evenings and on the weekends. And that's where their players like Disney come in. Because what is teaching the children when they're not at school? The television is. The Disney Channel is. So what's the subliminal messaging in the content that young children consume when they're not being force-fed the government line directly?
All right, so here's a question on that one then. With the advent of the internet, it doesn't strike me as odd that everyone got away from television as quickly as possible and gravitated to things like, say, YouTube, which for a long time seemed very, very, I don't want to say censorship proof, but you had more content that was created by people that weren't specifically centralized.
Yes.
But if you haven't seen, in the past year, there's been an insane number of, what's the thing I'm looking for here? An insane number of changes policy-wise at YouTube, all of which make it more difficult for independent creators to do what they want to do. And every single one of them making it more beneficial for, say, centralized creators of perhaps the old days. And I don't want to feel the need to have to point out again that the company that owns Google is called Alphabet,
Right.
Which happens to be the derogatory term used to talk about all of the agencies of the government. Also, don't want to point out that we just had a huge, absolutely enormous television, Netflix special that has now confused the term alphabet people. which forever meant government agents. But someone has now tried to change that term to mean gay people and people involved in the LGBTQ organization, or that whole grouping of people.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is standard operating procedure for psychological warfare, right? You're fighting for the control of what language and what words mean. And that is exactly right. That is exactly the front line. And that is exactly what it all boils back down to. When the power of television was broken, information, the truth, it wants to be free. So it fled to the internet. So now they're pushing and doing whatever they can to re-centralize that, to put that free time, to put that away from the state prisons time back in the control of their cronies, where they can directly influence it via command and their old boys networks that run to the very top.
It's insane. Well, I think we've damaged my normally obsessed with music listeners. Now they're going to operate for at least an hour on the wavelength that I operate on at all times.
There you go.
You thought it was all just honestly about music, folks, but what you didn't know was there's a scarlet thread running through the whole thing.
What you didn't know is that your favorite musicians worked for military intelligence. I hate to break it to you.
Yes. Well, I mean, I knew that, but I still like my favorite musicians.
I do too.
Cause I got her brand is on me, well I'm branded. She got a name on me, cause I'm stranded. Cause she got the keys, I'm walking in the rain. Taking to the bar just to drink some more.
Oh, Mr. Sweet Johnny Rocket, you sit there with your sweet smile and your sweet talk, and you don't know what you're talking about. I got a story for you, and it goes a little something like this.
While I have you, I feel it is imperative of me to ask, because this is the thing that I really, really wanted to know. You go by Dogman Respector on Twitter, and that is based on your own personal research into the Dogman. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about this, because I find it interesting, and it'll be the jumpstart into the question I really have for you, because I'm curious about it.
Sure. So everyone knows the story of the werewolves, right? Just another boogeyman for little children. But what people might not be aware of is that rampant here in the U.S. are sightings of what's become colloquially called the Dogman, an upright canine that's bigger than even a big man with vaguely humanoid features. And now my fascination with this goes back to my fascination with all cryptids. But I chose to fixate on this one specifically because the genesis of a lot of these sightings in North America is about 30 minutes from my house, give or take. And that is called the Beast of Bray Road. And so I decided, hey, maybe cryptids are real, maybe cryptids aren't real. But if, the North American origin point of this nonsense is so close to me, I might as well spend a little bit of my free time and might as well invest myself if I want to take these things seriously in trying to find it. Now, I wish so dearly I had any proof, not just for the people who listen to me and consume my content, but for myself. I want to get to the bottom of it. But, I haven't seen it myself yet. I stake out places where there have been sightings. I follow reports and look for the trends. I even put on Twitter, probably almost a year ago now, a marked up map of the state of Wisconsin with a key for Dogman sightings, UFO sightings, and other weird just places and areas of interest. And it's remarkable just how much of this, I'll call it woo, because that's what one of my favorite radio hosts calls it, occurs around bodies of water and rivers
Who's your
and
favorite radio
nominally
host?
holy sites. What?
I
Interesting.
said, who's your favorite radio host?
Well, it was Art Bell, but he's dead now.
Okay.
The one I'm talking about is a gentleman named Kev Baker. It's
Okay.
easiest to find him on YouTube. And I wouldn't say he's my favorite, but he's great about this conspiracy stuff. He really is. Just
Nice.
Interesting.
So now maybe I'm romanticizing this a little bit, but in my head, I have visions of just hopping into a late 90s Cutlass and driving out into the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, at night under the moon, because all good things that should happen under the moon. And you got like an iPod with you because you're an anachronistic kind of guy, but you don't want to go too far back. So the Walkman was out, and you got your earbuds in, and you're listening to something as you do, like what's his name from Boondock Saints, Willem Dafoe and Boondock Saints,
Oh, okay.
reconstructing the scene of whatever happened.
Yeah.
Will the culprit return to the scene of the crime? What is on that iPod that you're listening to?
Okay. What I can do, or what I will do, let me open up the playlist itself. I recorded them, or I made a playlist of them. I've got it on Spotify and a bunch of other places.
Hopefully
I also
you can share that
listed
with
it
us. I
on
can
you-
let the guests know.
Yeah, I'll do that. Actually, I'll do that. I didn't know that was even a thing. I don't use Spotify a whole lot, but yeah, I will do that after the show, actually, because I need to figure out how to do that.
It's pretty easy. If you have any questions, I can show you. I do it all the
Okay,
time for different.
sure.
I do it all the time for different bands. That's how, like, people, like, if I start a new cover band and I want to let people easily know what I want to cover, I just send them the songs that I want to do with the appropriate versions, and then they're right there so they can start learning them.
That's perfect.
Yes. So
But as far as what's on the playlist itself, I compiled the YouTube list with them because I already know how to use and share those. And
Mhm.
just some of the highlights. The first one, whenever I'm starting a podcast project or I'm on my way out to check out a site, there's one song that always gets played first. And that's The Chase by Giorgio Moroder.
I know
And
the
a lot
song
of people
well.
yes, they'll recognize that as the Coast to Coast AM theme song. And that never fails to put me into the right mood. But that's just the start of it. There's a lot of other shit on here. Pardon my language there.
Oh no, you're
But,
not gonna get that out of my people.
Yeah. The End of Days by Vinnie Paz is always high on the list. A little bit of conspiracy rap. Then we get into Johnny Cash, actually. Really sets the frame of mind for me personally, just based on my background. You've got the hits like God's Gonna Cut You Down. You've got White Rabbit from the Jefferson Airplane. I wish I could say that there's some sort of central theme to it, but it's more based on a personal aesthetic and what I get out of the hunting experience.
I mean, I'm you're telling me this, and I'm like, I see all of these things. Like, this is exactly how I imagined it.
Right.
And
okay,
and
well,
when what you say,
good.
you don't see a central theme. I couldn't describe what the theme is, but I see it.
Okay.
Like, I know I can.
Right.
I feel. It's more of I feel the theme behind them.
Sure. Another song on this list that I could not recommend highly enough that just fits this theme perfectly is No Place to Hide by Jace Everett. It's a
Ooh.
little bit country poppy for a lot of people, but I think it sets the tone just exactly right for this sort of thing. There's the obvious callbacks. People Are Strange by The Doors. And this one might strike people as a little bit outlandish for what the project is and what I do. But Smells Like Teen Spirit also actually makes the list.
That one actually does surprise me.
Why?
Yeah, it's a little bit off theme for the rest of it, but there's something in the music of that song itself that just laces together with the rest of them just right.
We'll see. I mean, let's not discount its own connection to one of the biggest conspiracies of music.
Yeah, that was my
Of
thought.
course. Yeah.
I want to point out, since you mentioned a particular song, the song "People Are Strange" by the Doors, and I've always kind of found it interesting, its connection to the movie The Lost Boys, which is kind of a story about vampire infiltration in a small town.
Yes.
Now, given what the big narrative that we've kind of covered so far on the show, I find it interesting that, is this kind of like the very beginning of the whole, like, say, like the limited hangout on proving that last part of what Alex Jones was trying to tell us, Maybe we have been infiltrated by vampires, and then that song's kind of like the thing. Oh, well, I mean, it was there. People knew.
Yeah, the mimetic key to it all.
the Doors is the mimetic key to everything going on. That's going to be the final straw in vindicating Alex Jones. Now, I'm curious what your thoughts are with Jim Morrison. Like, do you feel like his involvement is something he was a part of, or do you think that he was just happened to be part of this bigger system? Like, do you think he's? I mean, we could say that with a lot of these, in general, the types that have been utilized to push the narrative over the years. Do you think that they're unwitting or are involved in their own way, and perhaps the reason that they defect, we'll say, is because it weighs in their consciousness what they've been part of knowingly?
Sure. So, to directly answer the question, I think that sort of founding generation of rock and roll, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they were mostly unwitting, because I think they were the laboratory generation for these projects. Use your marked men, use your actual agents to push these drugs into this scene and see just what results from it. And then as it became a more sophisticated operation and ongoing, that's when they get into other things like Operation Monarch, where they're fine-tuning it and then using these systems that they studied and developed to produce their own stars to push their own message.
Well,
does that make sense?
No, it does. Because then it gets me thinking about it. I mean, mysterious death, and especially mysterious death at a young age, is not something that's even remotely abnormal in the music world. Obviously we've got the 27 Club, which is a bunch of high profile. I don't want to say how many of those were deeply involved in exactly the scene that we set with the psychedelic movement. A lot of young deaths in that out of like the people that were famous during that. But you can follow this all the way back. The Big Bopper, Richie Valens, that whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like this whole thing goes back as far as the beginning. Is rock and roll itself at its very core part of it. Like essentially the youth rebellion is this been like is utilizing music to direct children been the cause since day one?
You're saying all those old fogies back in the 50s, right?
I guess what I'm saying is maybe.
Yeah. So
I realize that whole thing is just enormous. Like, it's a giant can of worms.
I think that, again, the motto I live and direct all my projects by is that whatever the truth is, it's stranger than anything we could imagine. So I'd have to say that if you put a gun to my head and say, hey, what is it? I'm going to say, yeah, probably. Probably some sort of op straight back to the beginning, but I can't say that definitively, nor would I ever say that.
I'm going to be honest, Paz.
I
really hope for everyone on Earth that the truth isn't stranger than what my brain is capable of concocting, because we're all fucked if it is.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too, right?
We're all
If I could find the truth, and the truth was that I was wrong, I would be ecstatic. I really would.
Oh my goodness.
But there's just so many more forces at play, and so many chess pieces we can't even see on the board, that it would be foolish to think that somehow there wasn't a plan the whole time.
Oh my God. We're gonna have to let you go because it's just now I've got too much stuff I gotta go and look up on Google.
Well, don't use Google. You got to use something else now.
You're right. Use DuckDuckGo or whatever the hell it is.
Which you got to use as a dusty old library, frankly.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do with those things? I don't even know where a library is. I don't even think libraries have old books anymore.
It's
No, they
remarkable
really
what's
don't.
actually being disappearing from libraries. You can't find a Bible in a library anymore. Weird.
But that's the point, right? Pushing
Well, no,
information
absolutely.
control from the top.
You know what else you can't find from the library? Mises or Rothbard.
This is true.
Boss, thank you so much for coming on today, boss. This was a super fun episode. I hope the audience likes it as much as I do, because this is kind of where I come from. This is the world I'm constantly living in, where all of the great people in rock music are part of a giant government conspiracy, and yet I still work on becoming a famous musician.
Well, just be careful not to actually sell out when they come with the contract, then, right?
I know money is super, super exciting to think about. Anything you want to plug while we've got you here, boss? Where should we send our people to learn out more about you and your cause, or perhaps throw you a few shekels to make investigating the Dogman, more of a reality?
Sure. Whether it be camping passes, audio equipment upgrades, gas money just to get to and from locations. First things first, follow me on Twitter at Dogman Respector. From that page, I've already got a link to PayPal, and I chose that very specifically so that people wouldn't feel under a constant compulsion like they might on Patreon, and because there's no real fixed cause on an ongoing project like this either. It's not a movie, it's real-time investigation. So if you feel like giving, go to my Twitter page, and there's a link there. I am part of a podcast proper in which I'm one of the actual hosts. That's the Gaslight Hour. You can find it on most podcatchers except iTunes. We just haven't set up the feed to there yet. It posts fairly irregularly through Libsyn.
And Libsyn didn't automatically do it?
No.
That seems weird.
Yeah. Well, part of the problem is we didn't have the right style of artwork attached for iTunes to accept it, which is a dumb, small thing to fix. But
that's an incredibly annoying thing that I completely understand on both sides of that, why it's annoying.
Yeah. So check out the Gaslight Hour. Check out my Twitter feed. That's where most of the action is. That's where all the updates happen. That's where the magic is made, as it were. And, check me out on the Fagcast. Those gentlemen are nice enough to have me on just all the time, talking about all sorts of stuff. And, look for me on other shows.
Frankly,
I was just on Erase This Date. They do a great podcast as well.
That was a good. I listened to that. That was great. We gotta get him on the show too, Liz. Make it on a note.
Cool.
So, fun.
I think that's the list of the plugs. The Gaslight Hour, and then everything else is available on my Twitter feed.
Specifically, what is the Gaslight Hour? Because that's interesting to me.
Yeah, so it's me and, depending on the day, 2 or 3 other dudes. You might know them on Twitter at Absurd Nihilism. It's kind of his baby. He was the founder of the project. And it's a deep dive into a lot of specifically UFO stuff, but we kind of talk about everything. And it's not a comedy show. And it's tonally super serious. And that's kind of a change of pace from a lot of other stuff out there. But it's a very serious, very research-driven project. And we put in a lot of time to making sure we have all the facts right when we get on there. So it's really interesting in that regard.
Nice.
what is the podcast that I was going to ask you if you guys are fans of? It's Dictor von Doomcock and Gary from Nerdrotic have a UFO podcast that they do. And that's bugging me.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever even heard of it. I have no idea what you're talking about, honestly.
Oh, it's terrible. Okay, let me see here. I know this is killing time. Gary. Mm-hmm. Oh, the Exozone.
The Exozone.
Yep. And it's Dictor von Doomcock and Gary from Nerdrotic. And they talk a lot about UFOs and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's
They're both
a hell of a stage name.
I've never seen his face. That's part of the charm. He is just a mask. Looks a lot like Dr. Doom. And apparently he has a base in the middle of a volcano. So, you know.
As you do.
Yeah, well, that's pretty fly, though, huh?
Yeah. It's amazing that they managed to do episodes when he does live in the inside of a volcano. But they managed to pull it off. So, once again, thanks so much for coming on, Paz. We're going to let you get going. We got to go tend to the child upstairs who's being a child. But this is a lot of fun, and I can't wait to release it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute blast. It really was.
Liz, you look very confused still.
That's okay.
Okay.
Well, it only gets worse, Liz. I hate to break it to
That's
you.
all right. That's all right. I like researching, so this is a lot to research.
We just ruined her. She's broken now. All right. Take it easy there, boss.
Yeah, you too, man. You two have a good night.
What did I tell you?
Do you feel creeped out yet?
I'm asking you if you're creeped out, Liz.
Yeah, I was creeped out then. I'm still creeped out. I'm like, we're going to go into the belly of the beast. We're going to that place.
And what does
the big D
what does
on
the
it.
beast mean to you?
I don't know. I was just thinking about the Disney thing. It's a figure of speech in my mind, but
I mean, you're the one with like all the churching and stuff.
yeah.
I wish there was a. I want to write a movie about sea urchins.
What in the world is that?
They're like religious sea urchins.
That sounds amazing. I would watch that movie.
Or we can do like the biblical version of Oliver Twist called sea urchins or street urchins.
You're so silly. You had me with the first thing because I was thinking Squidbillies, but the second thing's just ridiculous.
I do miss my Squidbillies. So,
yeah.
Anyways, folks, I hope you enjoyed it. It was another fun one for us.
For sure.
Little weird. We get into some dark stuff there.
Yes.
Hopefully nobody's coming for us when we release this.
We thought it would be good for giving you a little, touch of spooky.
You won't actually know until a month later if the podcasting stops because we're going to be.
That's true.
We're about a month ahead on these, but
right. Oh, geez. That just occurred to me. We're going to go to Disney, and then like if we don't come back, they're not even going to know.
Well, just know that like I didn't stay in Florida of my own volition.
Right.
I'll say that much.
Don't believe any of the stories.
Yeah. So, who do you want to plug this week? What other podcast? Have you had any fun ones you've been listening to lately?
I mean, I've been listening to all sorts of fun stuff.
I know. I've now listened to like hundreds upon hundreds of podcasts, so I couldn't possibly narrow it down. How about this Burning Boots podcast?
Yeah, right on.
There's some pretty. I don't know. It's a lot like those other guys that I like.
The
the soldier guys.
Yeah. I can't think of the name.
Biting the Bullet. Biting the Bullet podcast.
Yes.
See, they get plugs every episode. Biting
I
the
know,
Bullet.
because they're fun.
I do. They are fun.
I really like that show.
But Burning Boots is another one along that lines.
Nice.
Just three dudes shooting the shit,
They've been through it. They came back.
being fairly degenerate. I don't know. I think only one of them is actually a soldier or something.
Oh,
These
right
guys
on.
are just like dudes.
Oh, okay. Dudes. I like dudes. Dudes are cool.
Mm-hmm. So, anyways, we'd like to thank you everyone for listening. As
Yeah.
always, thanks for hanging out with us. Stop by soundslike.liberty.com.
Mm-hmm. Or check us out on Facebook because we do chat on Facebook. And if you like to do the Twitter, please go do the Twitter with Nick because he likes to.
Yeah. And if there's anything about the show you don't like, I guess, piss off.
Okay.
Dirty lout. Peace.